Tamer Abouzeid, thank you so much for joining the show. I really appreciate you jumping on.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so you are a representative of the Chicago Alliance Against Racist and Political Oppression. They are,
Repression.
repression, sorry, yes. They have, since back when I was in Chicago, as early the months after the Laquan McDonald shooting, started putting together an ordinance called CPAC, which stands for.
Civilian Police Accountability Council.
All right, there we go. I, for some reason, always have a problem remembering that what that acronym stands for. Okay,
Chicago is one big alphabet soup
it
when it
is.
comes to
It
these
is.
organizations.
It is. It so is. So, um, I have come out, just for the record. I've came out when I wrote an op-ed in Cranes, more in favor of GAPA than the CPAC version. This is many months ago, and without trying to, just wanted that on the record so everyone knew it. But I want to say, we're not going to go through in this interview the litany of changes that have gone through these ordinances over the years. You need a PhD class to get through all the changes between CPAC and GAPA, the Grassroots Alliance for Police Accountability, and everything that has happened. But I want you to help us get caught up. So I can just tell our audience, for since sometime in 2016, both the people backing CPAC and the people backing GAPA came together to create something that they thought was going to be some kind of council or commission that was going to have oversight, a more thorough and rigorous oversight of policing, but also a liaison between the community and the police, which we don't have now. The police board tries to do this with their monthly crappy meetings, which I've gone to for years and years, way too long, way longer than I want to admit, because I'm an old man now. And they've always sucked. They may slightly less suck now, but they've sucked for an eternity. So in that spirit, I've backed both ordinances for that purpose alone, just creating a real spot where communities could come together, ask questions from people that had some clout and some ability to demand answers. So those ordinances were going through this, going through the system independently, sometime in competition of each other, talking on again, off again, talks with aldermen in the mayor's office. And several months ago, or a few months back now, we're in COVID time, so who knows how long anything is anymore. We have a point where Mayor Lightfoot announces publicly that she's backing away from the negotiating table or negotiating tables, and announces she's going to institute her own ordinance. And I'm on the record on this show saying that was a colossal, epic, unbelievable mistake. And I said, Lori is incredibly smart, but I thought that was an incredible mistake. You don't tell community members who have been engaged in a process, both from CPAC and GAPA, for 5 years, that no, now you're done. That was just a colossal, epic mistake. So what I want to start off is if you could help bring our viewers up on what was going on behind the scenes, as best as you're comfortable telling us, when, leading up to the mayor walking away.
Yes,
There you go.
absolutely.
Beautiful.
Sorry, my dog was barking there, but I
Oh,
was still on mute, so that's good.
yeah, no problem.
Yeah, so obviously, I wouldn't really say that CPAC and GAPA, were in conflict, but obviously there were folks who supported one or the other, but there were also a bunch of folks who supported both, including a bunch of co-sponsors. But yes, they were two different visions, but they were both importantly created with the communities in mind, right? They were both created based on what the communities said they wanted. And you mentioned now how colossal of a mistake it was for Mayor Lightfoot to say that she's going to come out with her own ordinance, and she split from, because she was working with the GAPA folks and they were close to reaching an agreement. Well, just imagine how much bigger this mess up is on her part when she is still saying that she's going to come out with her own ordinance, despite the fact that the folks behind CPAC and the folks behind GAPA are now united behind one ordinance. So you really have all the people all the community members on one side and Lori Lightfoot on the other. But to go back to your original question, there were always communication channels between the folks behind CPAC and the folks behind GAPA. And I think at some point in time, honestly, the mayor's absolute refusal to give communities any real power is what, at the end of the day, brought us together. And we said, okay, we have to hammer this out. We have to find something that we can agree on, because otherwise the mayor may be able to pass something that is weak and that doesn't create the fundamental change that we need. And that process, I would say, like, this last time this process started was, started in earnest the end of last year, and or maybe towards the fall of last year. And it involved lots and lots of meetings between GAPA and CPAC folks, ourselves, between GAPA and CPAC, and alders who supported either. And it was an intensive process of trying to figure out what we can put into a unity ordinance, the people's ordinance, that takes the best of both worlds, right? Folks from CARPA were ready to admit that there were things about GAPA that we liked, and folks from GAPA were ready to admit that there were things about CPAC that they liked. And it was a matter of trying to agree on what the best of both worlds is. And so what we ended up with is a unity ordinance that, creates certain baseline protections and certain baseline, you can call them reforms, I guess, that would be implemented right away. For example, the creation of the commission, the fact that the commission would be nominated by people who are directly elected from the police districts, creating these local district councils within each police district so that there's more of an input and a control from the communities. And also, giving that commission power over policy, and we can get into some of the details later if you'd like. And in addition, the ordinance also gives the opportunity for the people of Chicago to decide whether or not they would like to go further and give the commission even more powers, and that would happen through a binding referendum. And I have to just give tremendous credit to the folks from CARPA and GAPA and to our alders who met over and over again and really tried to hammer things out in good faith. And finally, because I think of that good faith, we were able to reach a pretty good, if I may say so myself, a pretty good ordinance.
If you had to put your finger on it, without going into the great details of the compromised ordinance yet, we'll get to those later. What was if you could point to one or two things that the mayor absolutely refused to allow either the GAPA version or the CPAC version to have, what were those things?
The mayor, I think the mayor's main sticking point with GAPA was the fact that GAPA wanted the commission to have final say over policy. At some point, the GAPA ordinance did not have that. And it kind of gave the mayor the power only if there's, a tie, like only tiebreaker power for the mayor. So if CPD disagrees with the commission, then the mayor breaks the tie. But I think the folks behind GAPA always wanted the commission to have the final say over policy. And the mayor was absolutely adamant that that would not happen, despite the fact that this is actually what is in place right now, for example, in Los Angeles, because, we looked at different cities and how they do it. And in Los Angeles, the commission has final say over policy, and the commission can be overturned by a 2/3 vote of their city council, which is how it works in our ordinance. But the mayor did not want that. And by the way, I think city council in Los Angeles, or whatever they call their body there, has overturned the policy decision of the police commission twice in the last 100 years, I think, something like that. So most policies actually are not controversial and happen through collaboration. And we encourage that in the ordinance. But at some point, there may be a difference of opinion over what the policy should be. And there is a fundamental disagreement between us who believe that should be democratically handled by that commission that is based on community input and community support. And the mayor keeps using this phrase, I wear the jacket, I wear the jacket. And so she wants to be able to control, have the final say on police policy.
Yeah, I thought that would be one of the issues, right? I think it was kind of, you could read the ordinances or the versions of them throughout the years and kind of pick what was going to be the issue. I know that it's how the position changes people. President of the police board Lightfoot and candidate Lightfoot would be all for these things. But Mayor Lightfoot can't possibly be for them. It's and she's also, by the way, against any alderman creating ordinances that would regulate police behavior. Anyways, like the Anjanette Young ordinance that she's against.
Right. It's really, it's really sad the kind of complete 180 that has happened, because a lot of the things that are in this ordinance were recommendations, like you alluded to, of the police accountability task force that she headed. And things, she promised that she would pass GAPA, for example, within 100 days of her taking office. Well, now we're around the 2-year anniversary.
Yeah, we're times 7 that.
Exactly. So I understand that that politicians make claims and they don't live up to them, but I think a large part of why Lori Lightfoot got a certain number of votes from folks. I think a lot of folks thought she wasn't really telling the truth and didn't vote for her anyway. But I think a lot of folks did believe her and saw her and really thought she was going to be a powerful voice for reforming the police department, just because of her experience and just because of the Police Accountability Task Force involvement. And it just, we really see a completely different person in office who not only disagrees with this ordinance, but like you said, disagrees with a lot of basic common sense changes that need to happen in policing. And she wants, it seems, to protect policing as it currently exists, or to just put her stamp on it, as opposed to the stamp of people and communities who have been working on this for a combined years of like over 10 years, right? If you put the years that GAPA put into this and the years that Carper put into this, right, at least 10 plus years. And we're talking about just the most recent ordinances, right? People have been working for more civilian control of the police for decades. So the fact that she can come up and stand against those communities and say police accountability is something that I started the conversation about, which is what she said in a press conference. She said, I started the conversation about police accountability in the city. Well, with all due respect, Madam Mayor, that is a ridiculous lie.
Yeah, no, it's ridiculous. And because just to show you how ridiculous it is, the police board was created in 1960, by the way, for O.W. Wilson. It was supposed to be around for 1 year. Exactly. So he could run the police department while not being a resident. And then the public liked the police board, so Old Man Daley kept it. And then when O.W. Wilson came in 1960, he created, so for everyone, we now have the Civilian Office of Police Accountability, or COPA, which Tamer used to work at as an investigator.
Tamer used to work at. Sorry, yes, I thought you said you still work at.
No, used to work as an investigator. Okay. COPA replaced IPRA, the Independent Police Review Authority, which was in 2007, created in 2007. The Independent Police Review Authority, or IPRA, took the place of OPS, the Office of Professional Standards, which was an internal office to the police department. Now, OPS,
and which was headed by
Lori Lightfoot
for a couple of years.
Yes, exactly. Mm-hmm. Now, OPS, everyone says, well, it was created in 1976. Well, that's untrue if you don't know your history. O.W. Wilson created an office that would later become the Office of Professional Standards, and between 1960 and 1976 was reorganized and renamed 4 times because it was so incompetent and so broken, it didn't do its job. And the last version of that reorg and rename came the Office of Professional Standards, and that lasted 31 years, as it turns out, and was replaced by a slightly less broken organization called the Independent Police Review Authority, which unfortunately, even though I helped create COPA is not living up to its the goals that people want, but also it's not. I'm not sure if it's built to ever do it. I have turned against. I shouldn't say turn against. I've helped shape the police accountability system we have in Chicago. I've been involved since 1996. I don't think it can ever do what we need it to do. And I think that's why we need legislation like this compromise ordinance, which I actually tend to really like. We need these things. We need the Anjanette Young ordinance, because the reality is if we want cops to stop doing things, we need to make them felonies, by the way.
I mean, look, I completely agree with you that it is that even creating something like COPA, which, like you said, like on paper, there's some pretty dang good things about COPA. Yep. The problem is we are creating one thing, but we're plugging it into the same exact system.
Yep.
And, we're not giving it enough powers at all, because at the end of the day, it still remains in the hands of the mayor. And we've seen what mayors do in the city with policing. And, since you brought up history, one of the other things that the mayor, is really adamant about is the fact that the mayor has to appoint the superintendent. Well, there was a short period of time in the 60s when the police board actually had the power to appoint the superintendent. And then, like you said, later it became, I think in the early 60s, maybe around 63 or so, it was changed to the police board nominates folks for superintendent and the mayor appoints them. So that's another thing that the mayor completely opposes. That is something that is not currently in the ordinance, but it is a power that would be given to the commission if Chicagoans vote for the referendum.
Yeah, and I really honestly think that has a good chance of actually passing.
I think so too.
And not just from like the quote unquote West Side, South Side cop hater people, those stereotypes. Like we used to have the urban predator stereotype in the 80s and 90s. Now we have the cop hater stereotype. I think a lot of people understand the police force needs to be restrained. Now, even though I am a police accountability person up and down, I also say we have the police doing far too many things. So we need to, people say defund the police. To me, my defund the police is reallocate resources that go to the police to actually solve the problems.
Sure, absolutely.
Get them to do less and take stuff off their plate. Someone going through mental health issues or drug addiction issues that isn't causing violence should not have a police officer show up, period. And that's my view. We could easily take, I bet, if we put our heads to it, 30 to 40% of what cops do and answer every day off their plates, if we could build a system to have something else respond that's healthier and make it better for the cops at the same time.
I think that is a very conservative estimate, Tracy. Like, as a matter of fact, it's always so fun to me when I show people statistics about what cops actually do. Right?
Yes.
Because when people think of what cops do, they run into the danger and they do this and they stop crime and all that stuff. And then when you show them what they actually do, that like less than 5% of their time is actually spent on like forcible or violent felonies. And I mean, you don't need to be a cop to give a ticket. You don't need to be a cop to stop a car for a traffic infraction. You definitely shouldn't be a cop to respond to a mental health situation, right? There are and you don't need to be a cop to fill out police reports, because the vast majority of the time it's something after the fact, and all you do is write up some stuff and put it into the system. You don't need to have a gun for that. So you're absolutely right. We can take so much away from what the police does and give it to civilians to do, and it would be done either just as good or way better, because those people, we can actually be sending people with qualifications to deal with mental health crises, as opposed to the small number of CIT trained folks who we have in the police department now. And it's mind-boggling that there is this absolute refusal to look at the type of reallocation of resources that you mentioned. And that's why it's really important for people when they hear defund the police or when they hear about abolition. Abolition, for example, is not just something about abolishing, prisons and the police. It's really about putting systems in place that make the need for prisons and police obsolete.
Yep.
It's the presence of these community support systems. It's the presence of good education and good jobs and good healthcare. And community involvement and community-based ways of dealing with conflict, whether that's through things like restorative justice or transformative justice or community mediation or violence interruption. All these things work. The evidence tell us they work better than policing. Policing as we know it simply is not effective in stopping crime. It hasn't been, and we keep throwing more and more money at it, and it's not happening. So I completely agree with you that there needs to be a complete shift and focus. And this is, by the way, part of the purpose of this ordinance, because this ordinance, specifically states that this commission has to look at non-policing alternatives, and has to look at ways to make sure that police is not dealing with issues that other people and other professionals are able to deal with. And that's one of my favorite parts about this ordinance. It partly also says that one of the purposes of it is to reduce overall spending on policing, because there are things that we can do, there are alternatives that we can carry out that would have better effects and would be way less likely to escalate situations into violence and murder, like we see.
So for you and our listening audience here, we are working on a study. We have metadata on about tens of millions of calls for service. We're fighting the CPD in a lawsuit to get more of them, but we have tens of millions. So we're looking at issuing a report probably in the next 4 to 8 weeks that analyzes 911 calls seeking police services from 2013 through 2019. And we are going to be looking at like what percentage of these calls actually contain some sort of violence, right?
Yeah.
And when you bring this topic up, and I have one of my friends and contacts is a retired officer, and I was talking about alternative response, and he sent me this thing about a shooting that happened in when this woman had called the police because she was worried. She was I think a domestic violence victim, and she wanted to get her stuff out of their house or their apartment. I'm not sure what was shared. And so the police were there, and her husband, partner, spouse, boyfriend, whatever it was, shows up and just runs in the house shooting. And he's like, "See, this is why we need police." And it's like, no, she had already been a victim of violence. She needed some force there to help protect her so she could get her clothes. I'm not saying send a paramedic to that. No one is. Like, yes, you're right that we are going to have a discussion about there is violence going on, or there's a high likelihood of violence, or someone actually needs physical protection, right, from an abusive person in their lives. What is that response? Maybe that response is still police, but that is the vast minority of what you do on a daily basis. We can go down that avenue forever, but I wanted to say that we're doing this report. Okay, so we're going to go over some of the details in the ordinance now, if you're cool with that.
Absolutely.
Okay, so this ordinance creates a district council in each police district, which we have 22 of them. The district councils have 3 people. And then from those district councils, there is a 7-person commission that is created out of the members of the district councils, if I'm correct on that.
Not quite. So okay. The people selected for the commission are not the people elected for the local district councils. They are the members of the commission are nominated by the district council. So basically, okay, like you said, there's going to be 22 local district councils, and each of them will, each local district council is 3 people. One of each of those 3 people will go to the nominating commission, which will be a 22-member body. And that nominating commission will nominate folks for the police commission. And The reason it was done that way is because sometimes it is hard to get a truly representative body just through elections, because there are folks maybe who would not be able to run because of whatever laws or because of fundraising issues or whatever it is. And so nominating folks may actually give you a bigger pool. And so even in the referendum portion of the statute, we do not switch, it would not switch to a completely elected body. There would still be 2 out of the 11 members under the referendum who would be nominated by the local district councils and appointed by the commission. And they would have to be representatives of marginalized communities, which is defined in the ordinance.
Okay. That makes sense to me. All right. I had screwed something up there, but so let's go over some more points. The commission can require the attendance, which I like this, of officials, and I'm assuming, and I think the ordinance states the officials are the police board officials, COPA, and officials within the police department.
Correct.
Or at any meeting or special meeting of the commission. So why is that needed?
It's needed because sometimes, let me say this in a nice way, sometimes those folks forget who they work for. And they need to be reminded that they work for the people. And when there are public meetings, we need them to be there to hear from the people directly. Because it is easy to ignore people. It is easy to send a representative or whatever the case may be. It is hard to look in the eyes of someone who tells you the police just killed my son 3 weeks ago and tell them, well, I don't think any changes need to be made. Now, it is also, I think, an opportunity for the people to hear from those officials, right? So for example, in the example of COPA, right? There are certain things that people, for example, will blame on COPA when it's really like something about the collective bargaining agreement, right? Or, you know, there are things that you'll blame on the police, but the superintendent's hands are tied because of whatever law or CBA is in place. So it's also important for the people to have, you know, a better understanding of the policing system and the accountability system. And it's important to keep those, you know, leaders in CPD, in COPA, and the police board, it's important to keep them also, you know, hold their feet to the fire and make sure that they are responsive to the people.
Yeah, I think, first of all, I love the fact that they would have to attend. I think that's great. And I think I agree with everything you said. I especially like this idea of like having to get clarity on what the problem really is. That was one of my issues with the people, Dante Servin. And if I got the names right, he murdered Rakia Boyd. Mm-hmm. And I apologize in advance. I do this on almost every show. There are so many people killed by police now that it's like obviously happening all the time. It just happened last night again, a traffic stop that went bad. I apologize if I screw up the names occasionally because it's too hard to remember all of them all over the country. I do my best. I really do. But the people protesting or at the police board while Lowy was the president, fire him for months and months and months. Like, it's being investigated by COPA. COPA's then got to pass the investigation on to the superintendent. Then he's got to make a decision. He can fight it and go back to COPA, or he can agree and it's got to file charges. So for like, you're protesting something that can't possibly happen, right?
Right.
And
right.
Unfortunately for the police board, I'm not anywhere near a fan of them. We're lining up to sue them soon for FOIA violations, but they were yelling at people that had no power to do anything they wanted done.
Yeah, I think that we do a terrible job of explaining the system to people. And I also think that we also do a terrible job in making the system so complicated. So for example, this idea of, you know, and also of course, contracts play a big part in that, yep. Right? Because people want to see results Well, COPA gets a complaint, they open an investigation, they do their investigation, they come up with a recommendation. It's sent to the superintendent. Superintendent has 90 days to respond, whether they agree or not. If they disagree, they have to meet to confer and see if they can agree. If they don't agree, it goes to one member of the police board. If the member of the police board sides with COPA, then it goes to all the members of the police board, minus that one member who must recuse themselves. And then even after it's all said and done with the police board, then of course you have like the arbitrations and the courts and all that stuff. And so you end up with this huge process, and it ends up becoming sometimes, it ends up becoming not responsive, right? And I think that's one of the things I was really looking forward to in the omnibus criminal justice bill that was passed by the Black Caucus, or that was championed by the Black Caucus and passed by the Illinois General Assembly. Originally, it was going to prevent collective bargaining from handling the issues of discipline and firing. And I thought that was huge. Unfortunately, that part got taken out before it was passed. So the FOP can still bargain over discipline, but I think that's something that is really important, and that the contracts really need to be fixed, and the process needs to be clearer to the people. Like, that's why I love this idea of the local district councils, right? This is something like the local school councils, for example, right? This is something that is hyper local, that is in your community, that you can really have a direct line to. And from that local district council, there is a direct line to the commissioners, those 7 commissioners who are going to be in charge of policy and all that stuff. So it creates this really good direct line from community to commission, instead of people having to go, like you said, to the police board and complain about stuff that the police board can't do anything about, or call COPA and complain about something that COPA can't do anything about, or whatever the case may be.